what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Steven, and I am the host. Joining me, as always, is my good friend Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing well. Feels like we're back to a normal scheduled episode. I know we did one on Tuesday, but that was still some fallout from the draft. And you guys were talking about the draft and the roster today, but it just feels like we're back. Like all the big stuff is over, and we're just kind of waiting for training camp.
Yeah, tonight's show will not be 2 hours like Tuesday's was. At least I think not. But I think we kind of agreed it was important to kind of take stock of the other guys, if you want to call them that are on the Chargers roster who were impacted by the 2025 NFL draft. So we're going to touch on those guys tonight. Should be a conversation. There's a lot of stuff going around about players who will be cut, players who will be on the practice squad, players who will be benched, etc. So we're going to talk a lot about those guys. And it should be a fun conversation to see how we're doing tonight. So if you're a Lakers fan in the chat, I apologize that you had to watch that last night. I think better days are ahead. Maybe when the Lakers realize that they need a true starting center, that would be good for them. So you can drown your sorrows with the rest of us here in the chat. And if your favorite NBA team is still in it, I hope your favorite NBA team does pretty well the rest of the playoffs.
Yes, and go ahead and jump into prize picks for that one. I had a student today who's like, LeBron is his favorite player. It's his GOAT. It's his, like, he worships the idol of LeBron James. And boy, he went on an absolute rant today, crashing out. I told him it was such a good rant. I'm like, dude, you should start a podcast.
Yeah,
the Lakers. Like, I'm sure there's a ton of those, but he was so specifically passionate and it was so well done. I'm like, hey, you should start one. So we'll see.
Yeah, there's the Lakers content creator space is huge. Shout out to my guy Sean Davis, who we've had some collaborations with. He's crushing it on his YouTube channel, formerly of Lakers Nation, on our Blue Wire Lakers podcast. So no shortage of content creators if you are a Lakers fan. If you are not, like I said, hopefully your team does well. I think I'm rooting for the Timberwolves the rest of the way. So LeBron is still my favorite player. I love LeBron, and I will always root for LeBron. But Anthony Edwards has become kind of my next guy. So I hope the Timberwolves do well going forward. All right, let's get into some Chargers talk here, shall we? Like I mentioned, we're going to take some stock up, stock down. Some of these were kind of brought up in our Discord, wanting to touch on certain players and things like that. Quentin Johnston is going to be discussed. Obviously, he is the thumbnail for today's show. Great choice, by the way, with the backflip. That was a very good Quentin Johnston moment. So a good choice there. Your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man quick super chat. You're a teacher, Tyler. If so, what do you teach? I feel like we've talked about this a lot. Like, Tyler is
I teach science. That is
Tyler is a teacher. I'm a school counselor. We both work in the education industry. So that's where both of us are at.
Yes. Science.
Science rules. I just think of Bill Nye every time I hear the word science.
Yes, they assume I've memorized the entire set of videos front to back. Spoiler, I have not.
Yeah, iconic Bill Nye.
Oh yes. Got me
all right, so let's get into our Chargers post-draft stock watch. I think we can start with Tyler Conklin as a stock up. Obviously, the Chargers signed him to a pretty modest deal, but none of the top tight ends in the draft fell to the Chargers. They couldn't have even drafted Mason Taylor if they wanted to. They couldn't have drafted Elijah Arroyo if they wanted to. Those guys all flew off the board. Obviously, Colston Love 10 to the Bears, Tyler Warren 14 to the Indianapolis Colts. So the tight end board really did not fall to probably where the Chargers, I think, would have wanted. Now, I would be very curious if Elijah Arroyo or one of those other tight ends had been on the board. Would they still have taken Trey Harris? Based on the way Joe Ortiz has spoken about him, I think the answer to that question is yes. So the draft pick of choice for the Chargers was obviously Oronde Godson, the second in the 5th round. And there's been some very positive outlooks on Oronde, but I still think he is likely for a hyper-specific role in year one. And we talked a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. We know he can get vertical. We know he can win in contested catch situations. So I think that's what he is going to be doing. A lot of, verticals down the seam. He can play on the X. I think he can produce more than Stone Smart, but I'm not expecting him to be like, you know, challenging for the targets in the lead. So really the stock up for me for Tyler Conklin is that I believe that he is going to step in and lead the Chargers tight end room in targets right away. He is obviously the most proven production. He's the most reliable pass catcher. And so I think he's a very pretty clear stock up for the Chargers roster.
Yeah, I think so too. If it were, Loveland in round one, very different conversation, instant stock down. But he is now the only, I don't say only proven pass catcher because, hey, Disley had a pretty good season. But as far as pass catching tight ends go, he's a more proven, consistent option. Gadsden, I think, will have a very good future. I think he'll have a very good role on this team in 2025, as you mentioned. But it could be a very hyper-specific role, while he's also doing a ton of special teams work as well. So yeah, Tyler Conklin, there's no real challenger for not pure receiving tight end, I guess. Like there's some inline stuff, but I'm assuming that's mostly not the bulk of his work. So as someone who's going to get the bulk of the targets at tight end, yeah, like I think it is stock up for him. I know we're all generally infatuated with the newest thing, the shiniest toy, but ultimately Gadsden, who they did trade up for, is a day 3 selection. Not a late day 3 selection, but a kind of middle day 3 selection. And if they liked him more, if they really thought that he could have been someone to play in front of Conklin very early, I think he would have gone earlier. I think the NFL would have taken Gadsden earlier, and what was not a great class. So next year, Gadsden stepping into the receiving tight end 1 role. All right, like I could definitely see that. But even someone like an Isaiah Likely, who drafted by the Ravens when Ortiz was there, it wasn't immediately the guy, and he might not still be the guy this year, although people want him to be the guy. But it's gonna, it takes some time for these guys to work into their roles over time. So Gadsden as a future 500-yard receiver, 600-yard receiver, hey, I'm all for it. But I just don't think that's this year. Therefore, Conklin is, stock up for me.
Yeah, I forgot that even Terrence Ferguson went like way before the Chargers were picking. So, I think they did well in playing the board, and you get Gadsden in day 3. I think that's fine. It's funny, his number 1 athletic comparison is actually Elijah Arroyo. So that's a rather interesting one. But I think Gadsden will have a role because he's just too athletic. But some of that is also going to, like we've talked about, some of like who's active on game day and who's not is going to depend heavily on who can play special teams, because we know that Conklin and Disley are going to be active. We know that Scott Matlock is going to be active as kind of a fullback tight end hybrid type. Tucker Fisk, I'm not going to say he should play over Gadsden because I think Gadsden's pass catching ability would weigh heavily there, but Tucker Fisk was very involved in special teams as well. And so it is an interesting thing to look forward to. Matt Waters here, as well as JSJ. They both think that Tyler Conklin is going to have a career season with the Chargers. His career high in receiving yards was 621 yards with the Jets in 2023. He had 0 touchdowns that year, though, which the fact that that was the Zach Wilson-led offense, as we know. The fact that he had 621 yards and 0 receiving touchdowns, I think, says a lot about the quarterback situation. He did have 4 touchdowns last year, which was a career high in touchdowns. So it's very early in the process. It is May 1st. Would you buy Conklin having a career season in 2025?
Nope, not at all. In terms of touchdowns, all he has to do is eclipse 4. So is that possible? Yeah, because it's 4. Yeah. But 621 receiving yards in this offense, it's not that he can't. It's just that you brought in Najee Harris, and then you obviously drafted Omarion Hampton, and you drafted Trey Harris, and you have Ladd McConkey, and you're already going to be involved with Will Disley. Smaller role, but he'll be very involved. So I just don't know where 61 receptions for 621 yards is going to come from. Yeah. Now, does he have 500 yards this year, 50 for 500, a very good season, be a better red zone target for the Chargers than some previous tight ends? Yeah, sure. Very, very good season. I think he can have a better season than he did last year, But yeah, 61 catches, 621 yards. I just don't see where that's going to be in this offense. I like Conklin, and his floor is very high. Like, I don't think he'll have under 400 yards, but I just don't think he'll hit over 621 either.
Yeah, so this Chargers team definitely has more mouths to feed than the Giants did that year. Or excuse me, the Jets, not the Giants.
Yeah.
So Garrett Wilson obviously had 95 catches. Brees Hall had 76 catches that year.
Yeah.
And then Conklin had 61, but then it was Alan Lazard with 23 catches, Xavier Gibson with 21. The second tight end, Jeremy Ruckert, had 16. You know, I agree. I think I could see Conklin getting, 6-7 touchdowns maybe, just because
Yeah.
the Chargers throw to their tight ends so much in the red zone, or at least tried to with like the whole 4 verts thing.
Yeah.
But 621 yards, I don't think that's happening. Again, Will Dissly's going to have some kind of role as a pass catcher. We talked about Gadsden having some kind of role as a pass catcher, and then the receivers. There's more receivers on this team than previously. So if you had signed Conklin last year instead of Hayden Hurst, I would have bought that last year. But this year, I just think there's too many more mouths to feed. But in terms of play time, in terms of role, I think Tyler Conklin can be very, very efficient. I think he can have a very good season for the Chargers. Like you said, maybe like 500 yards and 5 touchdowns is probably what I would predict at this point in time.
Yeah. Ultimately, I would love to see the younger guys on and projected to be on the roster for many, many, many more years get more involved in this offense, and Conklin just be a nice mainstay for them. And we're also, I guess, kind of assuming Conklin's getting more targets than Dissly. I assume that's going to be the case. I don't know. I think there's.
I would think so, because he can run more routes and he can play in the slot. Dissly can do the screen stuff. He can run routes really slowly down the middle. But they did a lot of stuff. Like they tried to get Will Dissly on like deep overs. Sometimes they tried to have him running like corner routes. I think those all go to Conklin, and I think he has a good season, just not a career season.
Yeah, I would take the under on 621. I'll buy 550, 500,
sure.
622 would be a lot, I think, for Conklin.
Yeah. All right, let's get to the next one here.
All right, so the next one up here is center Bradley Bozeman. They signed Andre James to a $1.17 million deal for 1 year, and that's it. I know Chargers fans want Andre James to start. I could buy that Andre James eventually is the starter based on like what you could get out of James and where you could see him for many years after this contract, should things work. Yeah, I'd love to see Andre James start. But with Bozeman, look, we said as soon as the season ended, pretty sure Bradley Bozeman's back. And because they were outright saying like, yeah, we love Bradley Bozeman. He's our guy. He should be back. They want him back. Blah, 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 blah. No, that's not going to happen. Bradley Bozeman sucked. He's not going to come back. And we're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure he's coming back. And then he came back. And not only that, but they gave him, what was it originally a multi-year deal is what we were told. And I had a heart attack. And then it being a 2-year deal, which we think the Chargers can get out of. But okay, they give him that deal. And then they didn't bring in anybody who could compete with him in the draft, which is part of the reason Steven talked about last episode, why he wasn't so high on the class overall, not necessarily the players that were picked, just the fact that there is no viable center of the future. And right now, I think the simplest way, the Occam's razor of it all, is that Bradley Bozeman's cap hit is comfortably higher than Andre James. Sometimes it just follow the money. Like he's $5 million cap hit this year, and Andre James is 1.17. You tell me who's starting. Like, I think that's going to be Bradley Bozeman for a while until things are so bad they have to make the switch to Andre James. They just like their guys. And, I think there's a glue guy aspect to Bradley Bozeman that they really like. Do I think that's worth starting him and not finding a superior replacement in free agency or in the draft? Like, no. At some point, you can be a great guy. I think Zion Johnson's a great guy. Bradley Bozeman seems to be a great guy. Trey Pipkins is a great guy. They've had some bad performances and some bad seasons, and they got to upgrade. But for the Chargers, they are behind Bradley Bozeman as their guy, and ultimately they've shown that so far. I think Andre James was a great addition. I was very excited when it happened, but given the the disparity and the difference between their contracts and basically them doing nothing in the draft, I think they think Bradley Bozeman is their guy. I think he is their starting center when things start out, and I would be surprised if he weren't. And I'm not sitting here saying that, I think Bradley Bozeman is a superior player and a great player who deserves to be the unquestioned starter. But like, they have kind of shown us that is how they feel.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack with this kind of scenario. And I tweeted out, my thoughts about this, and people were like, there's no way, like, Bozeman's not going to start. He was bad. Like, I get it. I agree that Andre James should start. I agree that I would have liked other ways for them to upgrade that position. But once they gave him that contract, I was kind of like, this is it. Like, if they had brought him back on a 1-year, $5 million contract, sure, I could see Andre James kind of winning that battle. But Andre James is on a vet minimum contract, and Bozeman was the same thing last year, but the Chargers didn't really have any other choices. His salary, or his total value of his contract, is the same amount that the Tennessee Titans are paying Brenden Rice to be their third center.
What a pull.
So I agree. I think Andre James should be the starter for this team. I think his 2023 season is better than anything that Bradley Bozeman has put out in terms of grades, in terms of film. I think he was a quality center in 2023, and then the Raiders situation went to shit. I just think that you have to follow the money. You have to follow the way that this team talks about Bradley Bozeman, like you spoke about. And this offensive line room loves him. Joe Alt, Trey Pipkins, Rashawn Slater, they love this guy. And it's a really cheesy thing, but like the way that he stood up to Nathan Shepard, the Saints, like, that's who he is as a player. And when you're a veteran center in a young room and you do that kind of thing, it really speaks volumes to who you are as a person. And the team is going to go to bat for him, as much as they possibly can. Had they drafted a center in like the 3rd, 4th round, I could maybe see a situation where that rookie kind of beats him out. Mm-hmm. But if it's him versus Andre James, I think they're just going to settle on Bradley Bozeman. Like, I think they will try and figure out who to play at left guard. I think Bozeman essentially wins the center job like the first week of training camp, if I had to guess.
I wouldn't be surprised there. If I were, we'd all talk about competition, but we said it last year, and we were very surprised by like, Trey Pipkins is our guy. Are you going to compete? Like, have competition? Nope. Like, Trey Pipkins is our guy. And that was it. And even anyone who was, I think we tried to be optimistic about Trey and the move inside, even though we had questions. But even we were like, really? That's all that's going to happen? And so you can't convince me right now that they really are going to have a legit competition with Bozeman and James. It really just feels like, there goes Bozeman. I'm sure Andre James will get snaps as a starter because you have to practice that. Like, so I'm sure everyone's going to be like, oh my gosh, it's time. They're making the switch. But I really think push comes to shove, Bradley Bozeman is the starter pretty early. I don't think that really even changes. If they start doing actual competition along the interior offensive line, great. But they didn't last year. And I just think that this is who their center is. And we'll talk about the left guard later.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, stock down next here. Jasir Taylor, obviously the former Wake Forest corner, one of Brandon Staley's favorite players, apparently, is what I heard a while ago. So the Chargers signed Dante Jackson and Benjamin St. Juste in the offseason. Obviously, Dante Jackson's on a pretty decent contract. St. Juste is, on a vet minimum contract. But then they also bring in RJ Mickens and Try Bridges on day 3, both of whom can play the slot, as we talked about on Tuesday's show. That I think makes them, much more appealing overall as prospects in this particular defense. So there's a lot more competition heading into this training camp for the slot role than what Jasir Taylor had last year, where he essentially was handed the slot job from day one. He was not in a training camp competition. The only reason he lost his role is because he got hurt, and then Tariq still was great, and then they started to figure out the Derwin James role. So there's a lot more competition. We know that Derwin James is going to play a ton in the slot. Tariq still can play in the slot. Elijah Molden can play in the slot. And now there's these two rookies who can also play in the slot. So in terms of his role on defense, this is definitely a stock down. The biggest question I have is really what is his special teams role? Because in the past, he's been a great gunner, but now there are more options at gunner than previously, including Dean Leonard, including Benjamin St. Juste, including the two rookies, including the rookie receivers, including Brenden Rice, including all these other guys.
Yeah.
So there's going to be I think, a legit competition at gunner. And this coaching staff, this regime did not draft up Jasir Taylor. I do think that there is a chance that he is a potential cut candidate. I would think that his experience would give him an edge over some of the rookie guys, but he's going to be in a fight for the roster spot, whether that's 4 through 6, we'll see. But like he is going to have to earn a legitimate roster spot this year, where he's never really had to do that. He's always been kind of locked into a contract, or excuse me, into a roster spot. He's always been kind of locked into special teams. I think there's a pretty decent chance that we are talking about him as a potential cut candidate, while training camp gets going here. So it's a very different experience for him. Mm-hmm. I'm anxious to see how him and Dean Leonard kind of handle that role after the improvements that the Chargers have made to this group.
Yeah, I think that even at the end of the season, I don't recall which game it was, but even John Taylor was making mistakes on special teams. Yeah, and that's where we started to get really nervous.
Because, there were like 2 catch interference penalties. Good call. Yeah.
And we, look, a 6th-round pick. Did I expect him to be some great all-pro slot corner in the NFL? No, I had hopes, I guess, sure, for him to be good, and it never really transpired. And definitely didn't. It seemed worse last year. Whereas I thought you could at least see the flashes with Brandon Staley in that defense. Just this switch, that specific switch to Minter, just didn't work for him. It was particularly always him losing in coverage. But that, with the errors on special teams, you just started to get really worried. But someone would always get hurt. And so he would always go out there and play. He would always be able to find snaps. And he ended up second on the team in slot snaps. But I just don't see that now at the start of this year, knowing who you have, because now you really believe in Tarheeb still. Like, they didn't really have designs for him to be out there. They saw him out there. Now they probably aren't going to take him off the field. Maybe that's a lot of boundary work, but he'll play him a ton in the slot too. Molden, you feel very good about. Again, a player they traded for, obviously felt good about, but you get to see what he could do. Whoa, there's Elijah Molden. I bet you he plays a lot more in the slot. Derwin James led the team in slot snaps. So like you're mentioning, it's at this point, yes, defense, like his role, I think will be minimal, if not much at all. But it's like you said, the specific special teams aspect of it that makes his job in jeopardy, because they brought in 2 guys, and watching these guys like Mickens and Bridges, I don't know if they'll be great defensive backs, long-term options for the Chargers, but I know they'll be good on special teams. A, because it's Brian Ficken, and B, because of what you see. They're absolute freaks. They are players with jetpacks on them who are unfazed about anything in front of them. They just see ball, get ball. And I think that's going to be pretty good with Ficken here. So unfortunately, I think John Taylor is genuinely in danger of losing his roster spot.
Yeah, which is unfortunate, because he almost single-handedly won them that Broncos game on Monday Night Football.
Yes,
him and Dustin Hopkins on special teams. So it's he showed signs of being like the next great special teams ace. And then they started him, and I get why you take him off special teams at that point in time. But this is a guy who has shown some pretty good flashes, and the first 3 games of last season, he was putting up really, really good numbers. He was very rarely giving up receptions, and then once he came back from injury, it just was not the same. So really unfortunate, but definitely stock down for Jasir Taylor. Before we get to the rest of our show, obviously Tyler mentioned Prize Picks earlier. NBA playoffs in full swing, NHL playoffs in full swing. We are only a few short months away from actually being able to use Prize Picks for football again, which is great or bad, depending on how long you want an off season to be, I guess. But overall, Prize Picks, super easy to use. It is truly the best and easiest way to consume daily fantasy sports. I love the fact that you don't have to go 5 for 5 or 4 for 4 6 for 6, or if you're a real sicko, 10 for 10. Like, I don't know how you guys are building your lineups, but you don't have to go 100% to be able to still win money. I love that feature. It makes me feel much more comfortable about being on the app because I'm terrified of losing money on that app. But that's not the case. As long as you can go at least like 3 for 5 or 5 for 7 or whatever the case may be, you could still win money on some capacity. It's a great app. We love using it. We've had a lot of fun with it. And it does truly support our show if you do go out and use it. Best way to do that is prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty at checkout. Again, that is prizepicks.com/guilty, code guilty at checkout.
Real quick before we move on, we don't have Dean Leonard on here. We can keep the thing back up, but I guess like why I didn't consider him at all, but John Taylor makes total sense. I feel that he's much safer, but I guess the same things apply here.
Yeah, Dean Leonard could definitely be a stock down. I guess I looked at this as there's just a much smaller window of opportunity for Jasir Taylor because he can play a little bit outside if he really had to, but he's primarily a slot corner. And if Derwin James is going to continue his role, which I don't really see why he wouldn't, I just kind of struggled to see the justification for keeping Jasir, where Dean Leonard as an outside corner, I think pretty reasonably could beat out Benjamin St. Juste. I think he reasonably beat out Triquez Bridges. So I have an easier time seeing Dean being like a true backup for this team than Jasir, who has a lot more competition in a more limited role with the way that they're going to use Derwin James.
Yeah, well said. I just had to ask because it's sort of the same things apply, but I 100% agree with you.
Yeah. All right, let's get to our next one here.
Okay, so next up is Zion Johnson. I don't know why I'm taking the offensive lineman today, but whatever. But almost the same, if not more so, with Zion Johnson than Bradley Bozeman, because their competition, barring Bradley Bozeman walking out into training camp at left guard and starting at left guard with Andre James at center, all they did was draft Branson Taylor in round 6. We've let our thoughts on Taylor be known, a player that, there's potential. You can see some things there, but ultimately, even more so than other players we mentioned, he's a round 6 addition that they didn't trade up for. Otherwise, they didn't make any other moves at left guard. Sure, they made moves at guard for Mekhi Becton to play right guard, but otherwise, that's it. And let's say, hey, they really did, and they do want to do the Zion Johnson at center thing. Great. They made no other center of the future moves in the draft. So even if his even though I don't believe he's playing center at all, that is still on the table for him. They didn't go, if they drafted a center in the 3rd round, like that's not happening. Like there's no chance your 3rd round guy is your backup or whatever. And they didn't add any left guards. So I've been cynical through this whole process. Bradley Bozeman coming back and being the center, poof, he's back. Zion Johnson, I don't still believe he's going to be at all of the center, a real legitimate option. Like if it were just Bradley Bozeman, all right, I could see it. But you got Bradley Bozeman and then true backup center Andre James, who's not playing guard. I'm fairly confident he's not playing guard. So like Zion Johnson's just starting left guard. This seems to be very easy for me at this point, barring a post-draft addition that's a very, very significant one. Zion Johnson just started at left guard. And of course, like that's why Stevens and I as well, but Steven was definitely frustrated with, when we talked about the draft yesterday and the grades, because we just mentioned on here, Bradley Bozeman's the starting center, Zion Johnson the starting left guard. And that's not all that different from last year. And we are one bad Becton injury away from this being the same group as last year with no viable long-term future, even hopeful options. Even if they're bad, there's not like a true hopeful option out there other than Branson Taylor. And as you pointed out, that's a multi-year project, and he could be good in 3 years. Chargers don't have that much time. This is this year right now with all 3 of those players, with James, with Bozeman, with Zion. So yeah, I think that Zion and Bozeman have basically, and Zion more so than anyone, have been given the, hey, you're going to be our starter this year. And that could be good. He could be good. He could be great. This could be the year. It could all come together. Technically, Trey Pipkins' 4th year was pretty good. Years after that, all right, not so much. But that final year,
4th year was really good.
It was good. It earned him that contract. So we'll see with Zion. I have to believe until I can't. He'd stock up for me because they brought in no competition to compete with him.
Yeah, I think stock up in terms of his role. I think some people will be a little bit confused about like the definition of these. I guess I should have said that earlier. But in terms of long term, like sure, I guess you could maybe say stock down. The Chargers have not picked up his 5th-year option yet, as we know. The deadline to do that is today, and there has not been an announcement. So I think there's your announcement, folks. It's just unfortunate for Zion that his career has played out this way, and like you said, he could potentially still turn it around. But I've never really bought the center conversation. Once they signed Andre James, which I like the signing, that to me said all that we needed to know about Zion moving to center. Like you're not going to sign a pure center guy to come in and play left guard for you potentially, and then give him a vet minimum contract. So the Chargers, I think, will try and do the competition thing this year more so than they did previously. I'm sure we'll see some pictures of Zion, playing center in OTAs or mini camp or whatever. Until he actually snaps Justin Herbert the football in a real game, I'm just not going to believe it. To me, like their actions have stated that maybe not necessarily like that they widely believe in Zion Johnson taking that next step, but they're going to give him another chance. And continuity is so important with the offensive line. I think they believe we just needed to upgrade right guard, and then the other 2 spots will just be better because they'll have more experience together. And I don't love that approach, obviously. So yeah, man, I think labeling Zion as stock up as the definite starting left guard is the right way to do this, because he doesn't really there's no real legitimate competition for him. So I just don't think Trey Pipkins sliding him to the left guard, I don't think that's really enough to beat him out. He beat out Jamari last year and has beat out Jamari several other times. And my thoughts about Branson Taylor are very clear. So I think your starting interior offensive line is Zion, Bozeman, and Mekhi Becton, which I think is better than last year, but I don't think it's the upgrade that we all wanted, a few months ago, I should say.
Yeah. At minimum, one of those 2 is starting. If you say, okay, Bradley Bozeman's playing left guard and James is center, like I don't buy that's going to be the case, but all right, at least, but still, even one of them is going to start. I think the absolute other scenario, other than Zion at left, Bozeman at center, is somehow Bozeman at left guard, Zion at center, which again, to me, just seems super complicated.
I just don't understand the point in doing that.
Right, exactly. So to me, just again, Occam's razor, like what is the simplest explanation here? Okay, Zion's left guard, Bozeman center, and that's it. And they've been showing us that. So I know they brought up the Zion at center discussion. That's really cool. I don't buy it. I'm sure they'll try it out. Good to have that backup option for sure. You never know, right? Good to have that option just in case, but I really just don't buy it. It would take significant injuries, I think, for him to be the center for a significant portion of the season.
Yeah. I think my take on the Chargers offensive line is if Mekhi Becton can stay healthy, then right guard has been upgraded. And in so doing, their depth has been upgraded. Like they entered the season with Jamari Sawyer and Sam Mustipher as their 2 main backups. And now this year, if Mekhi Becton can stay healthy, Trey Pipkins as your swing offensive lineman is pretty good. I know that there's a lot of people who wanted the Chargers to cut Trey Pipkins, but him as a backup is very, very good. Like not many teams have a backup offensive lineman that is that kind of caliber. Andre James, I've said I think he should be starting, but him as the backup center, much better than last year. And then Jamari, instead of being your first backup offensive lineman, is now your 8th backup or your 3rd backup offensive lineman, excuse me. So if Mekhi Becton can stay healthy, the offensive line will definitely be better. I just don't love the process of like how we got to left guard and center at this point in time.
Yeah. So there it is. I don't see. I mean, this was a pretty rough draft and free agent class for interior guys. So it's not like there's, oh
Yeah.
wow, there's a ton of guys the Chargers could not pull from and sign from. It's just, yeah, it's Hernandez, I guess. But at some point, they're going to be practicing in in OTA, spring and whatnot. Then I mean, it's May now. We are a couple of months away from training camp starting. I don't see them suddenly going, now that I thought about it more, and it's July 28th. We should bring in a guard that will also start over Zion. Like I don't see that happening at this point.
I think if the Zion to center conversation was ever going to be real, they needed somebody who could actually be a potential starter at left guard. And I don't think you sign a guy like like Andre James either, if that's your plan. So
yeah,
Zion's going to play, Bozeman's going to play. So pray that Mekhi Becton will stay healthy. Everybody, start those pro circles right now.
Yeah, no kidding.
Stock down. Unfortunately, I think we have to include wide receiver Brenden Rice in this kind of conversation. There was a ton of fan hype in the last offseason. Seventh round was definitely underdrafted.
Yes.
But a lot of people were very, very excited about him potentially being like the steal of the draft, etc. I think we just need to stop using that phrase for Chargers wide receivers, because the last time we had those conversations was KJ Hill, and that didn't go very well either. And I liked KJ Hill. KJ Hill was a fun, day 3 prospect to watch. But the Chargers obviously signed Mike Williams. They brought back Jalen Reagor, who was active over Brenden Rice. So they signed mid-season to be active over Brenden Rice. They drafted Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith. Why stock down? I think wide receivers 1 through 6 are pretty locked in. Could the Chargers keep 7 again like they did last year? Sure, I think that's a possibility. Very slim one though. I think the roster is in a place where you're looking at 4 tight ends, you're looking at 4 running backs, you're looking at potentially 9 offensive linemen, maybe 7 defensive tackles. Like there's a lot of other positions that are really going to make it tough to justify keeping that 7th receiver. Whereas last year with Simi Fehoko and Brenden Rice, it was like, do we really need a 6 defensive tackle? Probably not. Do we really need, X, Y, and Z? Probably not. So it was much easier to justify keeping the 7 receivers at that time. And obviously Simi Fehoko was outstanding on special teams, had the best receiver preseason of any of them. So he earned it. And then with Brenden Rice, it was just like, we haven't really gotten a true evaluation of him yet. But unfortunately, I just think the room is much more crowded this year. I think there's more other positions that need the extra depth than wide receiver does. So I know fans are very high on him. I know that there's still a lot of love out there for him, but I think we can comfortably project Brenden Rice to be a practice squad wide receiver, which isn't the worst thing in the world. Like I think he can be a practice squad player, continue to develop, and maybe in 2026 when Mike Williams is not on the roster anymore, these other issues might be sorted out a little bit more. Maybe Brenden Rice can make the roster at that time, but I do think penciling him in as a potential practice squad receiver is probably a fair assessment given the room and what we just didn't really ever get to see from him last year.
Yeah, I know this is funny because we last year projected the Chargers to carry 7 receivers and they did. So like obviously theoretically they could do that again, but the landscape has completely changed. I'm sure let's swap out DJ Chark for Mike Williams, but otherwise like now your Ladd McConkey and you have Trey Harris, as we mentioned, and Keandre Lambert-Smith. And the problem with Brenden Rice there is like that's kind of your roles. Like that's probably your thing. If the Chargers had no slot receiver and Brenden Rice is a really good slot receiver, hey, all right, like that you could still work that in some way. But they're pretty set at every spot in front of him. Obviously, I'm assuming Darius Davis is the 6th guy here, and so that's Brenden Rice isn't a returner either. And even Jalen Reagor was starting over this guy. I mean, they were starting everybody. They elevated everybody to try to play over Brenden Rice at one point. I don't know if Fitzpatrick took any snaps. I think he was added to the roster late, but I don't think he actually did anything.
I think he played in like one game when Rice had been injured at that point, when Rice and Fehoko and all those guys were on IR. I think Fitzpatrick played like one game.
Yeah. So as you said, Brenden Rice was definitely underdrafted. I was very surprised at where he went. So that could have been like an injury thing or something medically flagged. But yeah, it just feels kind of riding on the wall here. And sometimes, with 7th-round picks, you hope for one thing, you hope things will work out, but just if you can't hit right away and you've drafted or signed other guys who are making more, where you have more investment in because of draft capital, NFL doesn't wait for you to figure it out. And that's the other thing. With Brenden Rice, I don't even know what he can do as an actual NFL receiver. We saw him in the preseason. It was rough. Mostly not his fault, I think, but he also, when there was an opportunity, didn't catch the passes. It was pretty rough. And otherwise, he couldn't really get on the field. And when he got on the field, it cost him a penalty. And Herbert was like, "What are you doing? Move, dude." So, which could be part of this equation that we really don't know about. So, yeah. I know Chargers fans were very excited about this one. We heard it all of last year that we weren't actually doing backflips for Brenden Rice in the 7th round, even though we liked Brenden Rice. But here we are. Unfortunately, I think he's just going to find himself in the practice squad. And I hope in a couple of years, he's a starter for them.
Yeah, it would be nice. Des Fitzpatrick, for what it's worth, 9 snaps against the Raiders in week 18. That was it.
Sick.
So, yeah. I mean, it's... I like Des Fitzpatrick a lot coming out of the draft. Granted, I've learned a lot more about evaluating my wide receivers. We have more access to film and stuff like that. But I liked his profile a lot that year. So, with Brenden Rice, I think the good news for Brenden Rice is that the Chargers have an extra preseason game this year, and he's going to have more time to show what he can do. The Chargers are never going to just outright say that nobody has a chance, right? But if hypothetically speaking, Brenden Rice and Taylor Heineke just have this amazing connection in the preseason games, Brenden Rice shows that he can block, shows that he can play special teams, all this stuff. There is a world where I think the Chargers could potentially justify keeping him. Mm-hmm. It's just very difficult because where is that role going to come from on offense that really justifies keeping him? So I think I would have graded Keandre Lambert-Smith higher than Brenden Rice, coming out of the draft. And I think Darius Davis, is locked in. The one wild card here is they did test out Brenden Rice as a kick returner last year in training camp when I was there. We never really got to see it happen in a game. But if they want to try that again and he's awesome as a kick returner, then I think we can have a different kind of conversation. But it's just he's got a long climb, I think, to make this roster.
Yeah, and even with special teams, respectfully, that should just go to Keandre Lambert-Smith at this point in that 4-3. You should probably just give it to him. Yeah, I think I never really good to have Brenden Rice as an option. There's definitely different kind of returner, but yeah, I don't know. So like you said, he shows out. I could see them having him make the roster. We see players all the time make that initial roster, kind of wait for things to settle, quietly go to the practice squad. So that's possible. But I think in the long term, the macro of a whole season, don't know if there's much of a role. However, players get hurt, things could happen, but we'll see. But I hope things work out for him. It just seems like the timing is there this year.
Yeah, I agree there. Circling back to Zion Johnson, according to Daniel Popper, the Chargers have officially not picked up his 5th-year option. Yeah. So Zion Johnson will be a free agent after the 2025 NFL season. So you guys listening know how I felt about Zion Johnson coming out of the draft. I think everybody at least really liked Zion coming out of the draft. Mm-hmm. It's a real bummer that this is where we are with his career. Again, still potentially time to turn things around. But when they drafted him, I was like, this is going to be a guy that's on the Chargers for 10 years. And we'll get 4, potentially, maybe more than that. But it just kind of sucks, man. He had everything, he checked every single box that you could possibly want on draft prospect, but unfortunately has not panned out. So the Chargers were never going to pick that option up. They would have had to had a $17 million cap hit on him next season. But this is definitely showing that the Chargers are going to potentially consider moving on from him in 2026.
Yeah, definitely could not pick that one up. I thought maybe 1 to 2% after the draft because it is so stock up. Did they really believe in him that much? But they couldn't based on the price tag that he would have carried. I don't buy it. But yeah, I will not apologize for liking someone with that RAS, that film, a little almost perfect pass blocking efficiency, and a computer science major and he just like can't figure out how to pick up stunts. It's just it boggles my mind that guy can't figure it out.
Yeah, nuts. A guy who is a computer genius can't figure out how to pick up stunts. It's a bummer, man. It is.
Yes. Also, just on the topic, like Linderbaum didn't get his option picked up. That's because of his Pro Bowl escalations. That would make him like a very expensive option. So I think they're just looking to do an extension there.
Yeah, no, I think I saw that the center 5th-year option would have made him the highest paid center in the league, essentially, which he probably is going to be anyway.
Yes.
But it was like a full like $6 million higher than what Creed Humphrey is making. So that definitely is more of a contract thing than a play thing. If they're foolish enough to let Tyler Linderbaum come on down, by all means, Joe Ortiz can make some magic happen there.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree there. Next up here is Quentin Johnston, who I have both stock up and down. Someone mentioned earlier that, because of the nature of who they signed and drafted, it actually is a bit stock up for him. So we talked about it with Brenden Rice, same kind of idea. Signed Mike Williams, drafted Trey Harris and Keandre Lambert-Smith. But his stock, I think, is slightly, you can see it both ways. So you can call it stock neutral, I suppose. They added vertical boundary guys that really will allow the Chargers to not put Quentin Johnston in a bad situation where he's just not good in that role. On the boundary, on the outside, contested catches, it just was not his thing, other than the best catch of the season against the Raiders for whatever reason in Week 18. Once you saw his role change after that Ravens game, it really seemed like Greg Roman went, all right, like, we can't keep doing this. Let's just I want something, but that's not what Quentin Johnston's giving me. So let's go with more short route, intermediate stuff. And that played to his strengths. I think people forget. They see the Houston game and the Baltimore game, and I get it. It sucks. I was at both. Trust me, it sucked to watch. But there were so many good points throughout the season in the middle there where he was working the middle and it was short, and you saw him be more confident, take an absolute smack over the middle against the Chiefs. But it was a huge play for them, a very different, more physical player. And they can get back to that. That allows him to be more of what I think is going to be working for him in the NFL. Stock down because his snaps will probably go down. By the end of this year, if all things work out, he's wide receiver 4 or 3B, whatever you want to say, and he's not as involved. So I think he'll be like that wide receiver 3-4, emphasizing what he's good at. But I think that's good for Quentin Johnston.
Yeah, I think it'll be good for Quentin to just get in a more specific role, and similarly to Zion, right? Like, it's unfortunate that this is the kind of the career path that is going on, but I think we're at the point now where Quentin Johnston amongst the fan base is a little like underrated. Like, people are saying like he shouldn't even make the roster, which I think is crazy to me. Is he going to ever really live up to the first round selection? I don't think so at this point in time. Like, I think he can be a very effective role player, but I do think his ceiling is probably best suited as a wide receiver 3. And I think we've seen that when he gets to go up against a truly like high end corner, he just does not have enough to really, go out of his way and make plays. But can he be a player who can effectively execute a role? Yes, absolutely. And is that what you want in a first rounder? No, like, objectively not. But can he be an effective role player? I think the answer to that question is yes. And I think with this particular room where he can be the execute scheme touch guy, where he can work deep overs, where he can do more posts as opposed to like jump ball situations, I think you feel better about his role overall fitting the skill set. And I think that is why you can classify stock up. Stock down, also, I do think that is fair. So looking at the snap counts for last year in total, Lamb McConkey led the receiver room with 784. It's not that surprising. Quentin was next, though, with 702, and then Joshua Palmer at 616, and then Simi Foko at 249. So his role is going to be smaller, but I still think there's a world out there where he plays 500 snaps, maybe 600 snaps, and is like the Chargers' third leading snap getter. So it's definitely a bit of a yes and a no for Quentin Johnston.
Yes, I agree there. No, wide receiver 3 doesn't make him catch the ball. It just allows him to not have to catch the contested ones that he's not good at.
Yeah, he's not going to have to go run an isolation route against Derek Stingley Jr. in a playoff game and expect to win that rep. So, he catches flack for that, but like Derek Stingley is like the second or third best corner in the league. That's not who I'm designing fourth down touches for personally. So now they don't have to. Now they have other options. Now they have other roles where they can fit him in more perfectly. So wide receiver 3, I think, makes a lot of sense for him.
Yeah.
Our last one here, I think stock neutral is how I want to frame Kamani Vidal, who there's been a lot of talk about Raheem Sanders. There's been a lot of talk about J.K. Dobbins. Just to clarify J.K. Dobbins' situation again, he is currently not on the Chargers. He does not have a contract with the Chargers. They have placed a tag on him that gives them the right to negotiate with him if he signs with another team. But he is not on the Chargers, to be clear. The reason why I think stock neutral here is that obviously the Chargers signed Najee Harris. They drafted Omarion Hampton. Those are going to be your two guys who dominate snaps. Like they are the two players who will, I think, make up, like 90% of the running back snaps as long as they are healthy. I watched Rocket Sanders, the undrafted free agent from South Carolina. I know Alex Insdorf loves him. I know he is very popular on Twitter. I was not a huge fan of his overall ability to make people miss. I didn't love the vision. He is very fast, and he does feel kind of similar to Omarion Hampton in that regard, where he straight line physicality, like that makes a lot of sense. I just don't really trust his vision. I don't really trust his ability to make things happen. I think he's a fine chance to take on an undrafted free agent. But I do think I would have graded Kamani Vidal higher than Raheem Sanders. So I think he's a fine undrafted free agent bet, but I like Kamani more. And I think we saw some really good flashes from Kamani in 2024. There just needed to be a lot more consistency, particularly as like a pass protector. So I'm saying stock neutral and making the roster because I do think he should lock up the RB4 position, but I think his inability to play special teams will lead towards Hassan Haskins being active ahead of him on game days.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at with Kamani. Again, we'll see what happens in training camp. But I think the flashes we've seen from Kamani are very, very good. I just think the consistency has kind of eluded him. And I expect him to take a leap in year 2. So I have him personally ahead of Raheem Sanders by quite a bit. I didn't love what I watched earlier this week from Raheem Sanders. So I think stock neutral for Kamani. Potentially stock down if the Chargers only want to keep 3 running backs. Again, special teams value definitely a factor here. But I think Kamani definitely has an inside track on making the roster over Raheem Sanders.
I agree. Obviously, they drafted one player and did not draft the other. Yes, they've seen some of Vidal. Maybe they're disappointed, but I don't think they also saw enough to be super disappointed. Just comes down to can he take a step forward? Very comfortably, wide receiver, running back 4. I think he's running back 4, and that's fine. Is that active on game day? Is that not active on game day? I don't know, but I think he's comfortably running back 4 with a good gap between him and Sanders, but you never know. Sanders could have a great camp, but I think Vidal is a little bit of I know Hampton, Harris, Haskins, they can all do what Vidal can do, but I think Vidal still offers something a little bit different than what Raheem Sanders would in this offense.
Yeah. Questions about his pass protection in the chat. I loved his pass protection in college. I think the main issue with his pass protecting ability in the NFL was not an inability to do it. It was not like he can't take on the blocks, he doesn't have the strength to do that. I think it was seeing things, and it was the amount of different exotic looks and the fact that the games that he did have to pass protect were a lot of high-end defensive coordinators who really like to throw a lot at rookie running backs. So I think this is a skill that Kamani has. It unfortunately has not been developed yet. And if you think Kamani is a worse pass protector than Raheem Sanders, I think you are really, really mistaken there. And again, like I'm not trying to push like an anti-Raheem Sanders train. Like I think there is a chance that he can beat Kamani out. I still really liked what I saw from Kamani last season. And you mentioned bringing something different. I think him as a route runner and his ability to create some mismatches as a receiver to me is worth hanging on to. Whereas Raheem Sanders is, I think, a tad redundant with the rest of the room. And I would like to have something a little bit different with Kamani. So that's where I'm at. I would say stock neutral for now, but we will definitely revisit this particular position battle in training camp once we can see what Raheem Sanders can actually do in a preseason game and stuff like that.
For what it's worth, Raheem Sanders PBE of 90 last year and a career pass blocking efficiency of 89.7. Kamani Vidal's was 96. So different players they're facing, and I get all that. But just if anyone was curious, 89.7 is not good.
Yeah. I think Kamani definitely has that advantage for me personally. All right. Tyler, any other final thoughts before we head out tonight?
Oh, thanks everybody for joining us. We do have a couple of super chats if you want to get to those, but it was nice cleanser and wrap up, I think, to the draft.
Yeah, I agree there. Nicholas getting us going here. He wants to know, does playing in the ACC inflate Omarion Hampton's stats a bit?
I don't think so. I mean, not particularly.
Yeah, there's like 3 teams in college football that actually know how to defend the run. So I think every college team that people play is not great run defense, personally. Fartman 420. What are realistic post-draft moves to address the interior offensive line? We kind of touched on this, but did you have any other thoughts there?
Yeah, I saw this earlier, so I was just looking at like free agent guards. I couldn't tell you much about fit, but it's rough goes out there. There's like 11 names, even 12 names available as is. Scherf, I don't think is playing. Shaq Mason, Will Hernandez, John Feliciano. Like it really is.
I think Feliciano retired.
Okay, so not Feliciano. I'm down to 11 names, and I think 2 of them are over. Two of them are under 27, which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but their names are Carter O'Donnell and Jack Anderson. And if you know where those 2 guys are from, good for you.
I think Jack Anderson is Texas Tech, but I only know that because I'm pretty sure I studied him.
Oh, I mean NFL teams. They might be from Texas Tech. I have no idea. Where's Jack? All right, fine. Hold on.
I know he was on the Bills first.
All right. Well, let's do this.
Or I think he was on the Bills first, I should say. I don't know that for certain.
Okay, so he was officially on the. Okay, he's played for everyone on the Bills, then Eagles, Giants, Colts, Jaguars, Panthers, and now the Cowboys.
Wow, that's a lot.
2021. Yeah,
that is dang.
And it was Texas Tech, by the way. Very good. I must have not watched Jack Anderson.
No, that was definitely before you were invested in offensive line tape. And 3 years in the NFL and like what was that, 7 teams?
Sure, I'm not gonna go back and count, but yes, that sounds about right.
The other guy I've never heard of, but
yeah, no idea.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Teresa Compapes says that QJ is the grown-up version of Hot Hands Hanan?
Hot Hands.
I don't know who that is or what that is either.
Oh, from Little Giants. Just Google it. Not like that, but just.
No, I gotcha.
Gotcha. I was like, who's this?
Yeah, I have seen Little Giants, but I have not seen it in a very long time.
I couldn't recall anybody's names.
Okay. So that is going to do it for us tonight. We appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. Obviously, a lot to get to with kind of everything, letting the dust settle a little bit with the draft and where things stand from the roster. So we did talk about Brenden Rice, Mike Gonzalez. If you want to go back after we are done here, you can definitely do that. We are not going to have a show on Saturday. Now that the draft has passed, we're going to take a few Saturdays off, now and then. I'm going to go golfing and it's supposed to be great weather on Saturday. So I'm fired up about that. So we'll be back next Tuesday and Thursday, and then we'll be back on our usual schedule for kind of going forward until the training camp and all that stuff starts. All right, that is going to do it for us tonight. This has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you next time. As always, bolt up.